This is Jack Thomas bringing our friends in the Philippines a roundup of press comment from representative American newspapers. Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson's plan to prosecute war criminals according to legal procedure and to outlaw war permanently has been commented on by editorials in American newspapers. The Sioux City, Iowa Journal says, "This is the first time in history that victors in war proceeded against defeated leaders to try them as offenders in the same way individuals in civil life are prosecuted. Aggressive warfare is waged for purposes of conquest. The aggressor nation undertakes to wrest from another its property, to violate its freedom and its sovereignty, to abuse and humiliate its nationals." The Cleveland, Ohio plain dealer says that a live determination to fill any loopholes through which the war criminals might escape is reflected in Justice Jackson's report. The newspaper adds, "The difficulty facing the Western allies has been the discovery of a means of establishing guilt without either subverting our cherished Anglo-American judicial process or providing the Nazi criminals with legal technicalities which they could use to escape punishment." The more one studies the report on the subject which Justice Jackson, Chief Counsel for the United States on the War Crimes Commission, has made to President Truman, the more apparent it becomes that Jackson has discovered the way. The crimes which the Nazis have committed against the human race are self-evident to all civilized peoples. The civilized world recognized them as crimes when they were committed. It warned the perpetrators of the consequences, and the civilized world must in self-defense establish that a process of retribution by law awaits those who in the future similarly attack civilization. The editorial continues, "If this law can later be written down by an international legislative body, so much the better. But we cannot wait for that. Justice Jackson has shown us that we need not wait." The Birmingham, Alabama Age Herald points out that history itself has denounced aggressive war without a formal international document. This paper says, "Justice Jackson emphasizes that international law is not something fixed and final, but should be a growing body of doctrine emerging from the continuing experience and the conscience of mankind. It cannot develop by legislation," he points out, "for there is no continuously sitting international legislature." It may be readily realized that this particular objective set forth by the Counsel for the United States represents an international purpose of incalculable significance, going far beyond the punishment of war criminals themselves. If it can be clearly established among the nations that aggressive warfare is a crime, one of the greatest safeguards to future peace may be achieved. The Washington, D.C. Star and the St. Louis, Missouri Post-Dispatch are bringing to Washington an exhibition of life-sized photomurals which depict some of the horrors of Nazi concentration camps. The exhibition will open next Saturday at the Library of Congress and remain there 2 weeks. In the opinion of the Washington Star, it is important that Americans see and know about the subject of these pictures. The paper quotes General Eisenhower's statement of last week. "I think people ought to know about such things. I think the people at home ought to know what they are fighting for." General Omar Bradley, who visited the exhibition in St. Louis, said it was the next best thing to seeing the actual sights he witnessed at Nazi concentration camps. Representative Thomason of Texas, who went to Germany to see the camps at Eisenhower's invitation, said that people who see these pictures will come away with a better understanding of how imperative it is that the United Nations succeed in establishing a world organization. In conclusion, the Star says, "These pictures contain a lesson, not merely in the pitiable condition of human beings subjected to Nazi atrocities, but in the degradation of a nation which has suffered such conditions to exist. The pictures show what our soldiers saw, and if our people at home and the people in homes all over the world see the same things, even through the eye of a camera, the danger of future wars would be more remote." In San Francisco, while delegates to the United Nations Conference are putting the finishing touches to the proposed World Charter, editorial writers are expressing opinions on the finished product. In Chicago, the Daily News, in an editorial titled "Ratify the Charter," says, "It is apparent that the World Charter will be ratified by the United States Senate, and with ratification, America and the world will enter into a new phase of international relationships." The Daily News goes on to explain the salient facts about the final work of the United Nations Conference. It says, "It is possible to consider the Charter as 3 chapters. First, it is a pledge by the 50 United Nations to attempt to abolish war as a device for settling international difference. The Charter sets up machinery for the amicable discussion of such differences, for arbitrating them, and for preventing them reaching the state where armed conflict is necessary. It is the only answer." The paper explains the second point. The Charter may be regarded as a pact of the 50 United Nations for mutual protection against the aggressor nations, Germany, Japan, and Italy. And third, it may be regarded as a 5-power treaty between the United States, Great Britain, Russia, France, and China to preserve and enforce peace. The newspaper continues, "The Charter provides machinery that can sterilize the germs of war while they are still in the incubation stages, providing the peoples of the world and their respective governments are willing to make the effort. The machinery is there. It is workable machinery, but it must be provided with the motive power." The Daily News continues, "Drafting the Charter was the first great step. It must now be ratified by the governments of the 50 United Nations. Then it must be implemented and harnessed to the motive power of world opinion." The New York Herald Tribune says, "The conference could not, of course, measure up to every hope. The Charter will raise its crop of disappointments and doubts. But we must remember that the new organization will not function automatically or without further striving and straining, hard working, and thinking." The New York Times writes in part, "What has been created is a system under which all powers, great and small, disavow aggression. The Charter is a solemn covenant that power shall be justly used. The very disputes which have taken place during 8 weeks of discussion prove that its principles are being taken seriously." The Times continues, It does not and could not produce anything resembling a world government. It does, on paper, involve some voluntary relinquishment of sovereignty by the leading powers. Immediately, it is a device to keep the peace, and for an indefinite term of years. And ultimately, it may clear the way toward a real world government under which no nation, however powerful, will dare to bring the curse of war upon humanity. The Times also says that London is a logical choice for future meetings of the United Nations Security Organization. An editorial in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch hails the reorganization of the Polish government. The paper writes that the agreement reached is a fine testimonial to the faith and sincerity of all concerned. The St. Louis newspaper says in part, "The terms, as announced, are fair and reasonable. They are based upon the Yalta Agreement, and they provide for participation of all of Poland's democratic groups. There have been concessions by all parties in the sensible procedure whereby men of goodwill sit down together and settle their differences." The Cincinnati Enquirer gives a brief history of the Senate passage of the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act. The newspaper declares, "Obviously, if we are to bargain with other nations for a freer exchange of materials and manufactures, there must be leeway for such bargaining. Most opponents of the Reciprocal Trade Treaty program realized that it was too popular and backed by too large a part of the public and the American business community to be defeated outright. So they predicted their hope upon weakening it by knocking out the authority to reduce tariff rates below the previously fixed level. They enjoyed a momentary victory when the Senate Finance Committee, by a one-vote margin, struck out the 50% reduction authority. The more economically enlightened members of the Senate joined with the majority in overturning the committee decision last Tuesday. This presaged immediate passage of the act in substantially the form approved by the House of Representatives. The bill was saved. We have brought our friends in the Philippines a roundup of press comment from authoritative American newspapers. This is Jack Thomas speaking. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. This is the United States of America.